There's a commonly believed myth that art is an elective, and that's an entirely different topic, one so big that we'll actually save it for a future episode. Now, I'm not exactly sure where or when this myth actually started, because when you look back through time, through the history of the world, you can see that every civilization around the world throughout time had art as a very important and significant part of their culture. And the truth is that our kids need art too. It's not just a nice to have kind of elective, it's really something essential. So the next thing to consider is, how are we going to fit art into our schedule when we already feel so overbooked and so full of activities going on all the time? Well, shifting our belief about the importance of art really does get us halfway there, believe it or not, because when we feel like something is important, it becomes so much easier to find the time and make the time for it. So many times we think we don't have time, but we actually do. I read a fascinating book called The Big Leap, where the author talks about this concept of Einstein time, which is really interesting on its own, and probably another thing we can explore in a future episode. But basically, he told this story about a parent who's busy working, and a child comes in and says, "Can you come play with me?" And the parent is like, "I'm really sorry, I would love to, but I'm so busy, I don't have time." And what if that same child came in and was hurt and needed attention to a cut or a scrape or something? The parent would not say, "I'm so sorry, I'd love to help you, but I just don't have time." The parent would get up from their work and help the child, obviously. So it is a really powerful illustration of how time is this interesting thing that we do a lot of times have more of it than we think that we do. There's also a misconception that exploring art together with your kids, doing art history, doing any kind of art activities like this, is going to take a lot of time, and that's another misconception that we can address today. So as this channel gets going, I want to create an art revolution manifesto. So this manifesto would be a lot like the manifestos. Every good art revolution or creative revolution needs a manifesto, I think. It's been done many, many times throughout art history, and they're all fascinating to read. But I think what would be really fun for our manifesto here is if it was a collection of quotes from artists. And there is a perfect quote that addresses the issue that we're talking about today. And it's a Van Gogh quote. Vincent van Gogh said, "Great things are done, not by impulse, but by a series of small things brought together." So, what can we take from this? If we want to do something great in our homeschool, it doesn't have to be great and grand the way that we approach it, the way that we present it. It can be great because it's a collection of tiny, tiny things that built up and accumulated over time and became something almost bigger than the sum of its parts. So we don't need to put all this pressure on ourselves to research and plan and prep and carve out a big block of time all the time on this consistent basis in order to feel accomplished with art. It's not necessary, especially when you know you're going to be circling back to these artists over and over again as your kids get older, and they can see the art in a different way, and they can hear additional things about the artists' lives that maybe aren't appropriate when the kids are 7, but when they're 17, it brings in this whole new dimension and things to talk about with them. We all want to accomplish great things in our homeschool, and we can do this 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, one storybook reading here, one quick art activity there, a conversation over the dinner table, a trip to the art museum during lunchtime one day. And art museum trips don't have to be this all-day endeavor either. They can be a quick, we're just gonna pop into the art museum, look at one painting, look at it for a while, and then talk about it, really get into it, and that's it. We will leave without having the temptation to see everything in the art museum. And if your art museum offers frequent free days, or if they have a membership that you can join, that makes it a lot easier to not feel the need to get the most out of every single time that you go to the museum. But going to the museum for just one painting is such an amazing and powerful activity to do with your kids. It requires no planning at all. You literally show up at the art museum. Let your kids direct you to a painting that they're interested in. Spend some time, really look at it, ask questions to each other, get interested in it. Don't read the plaque yet, because it's fun to just kind of wonder and stay in that curiosity zone for as long as possible. And then when you feel like the conversation has kind of wound down, read that information card, find out more about the artist and the art. And maybe if there's a really friendly docent nearby, sometimes they have interesting fun facts that they can share with you as well. There are sometimes books in the museum store you can look at, and if there seems to be a particularly good one, maybe keep it in mind, check it out from the library if you don't want to purchase it that day. But just focusing on one piece of art is so memorable and so meaningful. When you go to the art museum and you spend a couple of hours going through several rooms looking at dozens of pieces of art, it's hard to have anything really stand out as being significant. But when you go and your kids choose the one that you're going to look at, they lead you to it, and you spend time looking together. You don't have to know anything about it. Just be curious with them, and it is such a fun adventure. Maybe you bring along a small travel-sized sketchbook and some colored pencils to note down your ideas or record a few details from the art. But if your kids don't like to do that kind of thing, that's an optional extra thing that you can do if it sounds fun or do once in a while. If sometimes some kids love it, so it's a fun thing to do every single time, but you can just decide for your family and for your kids what works best. So anyone can do this. Don't let perfectionism or the idea that you need to plan and prepare and have this big grand vision all mapped out before you get started stop you from actually just getting started. There are so many things you can do today that are one small thing that will come together to become something so great. I remember when I bought this book about how to teach Shakespeare to your kids, and that book sat on the bookshelf for a couple months, then a year, then maybe 2 years. It was a while. And finally one day I just thought to myself, you know what? I am just going to get that book down. I had been waiting because I wanted to make sure I had the right version of the plays to read and see if there were other activities that could go along with it and plan all of these fun things. Maybe there was a live performance we could see, and it kept me from just getting started. But once I just decided to jump in and see how it went, it was so much fun. I read through the first couple of pages of the notes on how to approach Shakespeare with your kids. We dove in and read the first part of one together, and my kids memorized sections of that play. We went on and on all summer with this book because it was so much fun. And we just approached it one tiny thing at a time. It wasn't all planned out. It wasn't perfectly organized. I didn't have a lot of background knowing about these things. That's why I bought the book, How to Teach Shakespeare to Your Kids. But it was so memorable and so much fun, and all these little things really did come together to become something great. And that was years ago, and my kids still remember the things that they memorized during that summer. And we've gone back and visited different plays and done activities over and over again. But it's just such an important reminder. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to have everything perfectly planned out and to be super organized and prepared. And it's not always necessary. And a lot of times it holds us back from things that are really fun once we just dive in. So if you're with art the way I was with Shakespeare, here are 3 things you can do to just dive in and get started today. Number one that we talked about earlier is reframing art as a priority. Really spend some time thinking about why art is important for your kids. What specifically do you want what role do you want it to play in your homeschool? And get really clear on the vision of how art is important to your family specifically. That will help you to really make the time, whether it's 5 minutes here or there, whether it's a longer expanse of time, knowing how important it is specifically for your kids, not just in general, not just in this abstract sense. Yes, art is important, but art is important art is important for my child. Why? And you know the answer to that question. Spend a few minutes just thinking about that. That's one thing. Another thing is to really embrace and internalize this small things philosophy. This great things are accomplished by a series of small things brought together. So if you're one of those people who likes to have everything all organized and prepared and this grand plan all mapped out before you get started, ask yourself if you could try to just jump in and do small things for a while and see how it works. And I think that once you give it a shot, you're gonna notice that it's so much fun. It takes the pressure off. It lets you experience things that you wouldn't ever get a chance to experience if it was all planned out, because you're in the moment and you're being really intuitive and responsive and spontaneous to the things that your kids are saying and doing. And sometimes if we have a plan, we're just kind of like going along with the plan and we don't consider shifting our path depending on what our kids are saying or doing in the moment. And then the third thing is just to commit to doing those small things on a regular basis, on a consistent basis, so that you can have, a fun art area for your kids set up. You can invite them to make open-ended art. You can remember to grab one more storybook the next time you're at the library about an artist, or search the internet for a fun work of art just to read about for 5 minutes with your kids one day. All of these are really tiny micro activities that you can do in just a couple of minutes, but they will add up to make a huge impact. Small explorations are still worthy, but it's the consistency that's the key. Remembering to bring something in every few days, once a week, every other week, depending on how much time you have. It doesn't have to be that regular of a thing. It doesn't have to be an everyday thing, but if you have a little time every day, or if you have a bigger block of time every other week or once a month, maybe you spend a whole afternoon, as long as it's consistent and the time is proportionate to how often you're getting to art, it's going to add up and create that great thing by all those small things brought together. Okay, so what is one thing you can do today? Think about it, decide, and take action. And let me know what you decided to do. Find me on Instagram, tag me, and let me know what your small thing was that you did today. And let's make a pinky promise. Every art activity does not need to be perfectly planned. Don't think about it like that anymore, because that's just keeping you from getting started. It's keeping your kids from being able to explore things in this fun and spontaneous way. And we don't need to do that anymore. We can just jump in, start where we're at today, and see what happens. I can't wait to chat again soon. And until then, stay inspired.